Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here, and welcome to episode 11 of Gold Goes to the Movies. I cannot believe we've reached that far, but we've got a collection of a real variety actually of 6 movies this week, one in the cinema and the other 5 available to watch at home, including one from a very long while ago actually. One is technically a documentary, but certainly about a man who's very much part of the fabric of movies and cinema, and certainly myself as a youngster and growing up was just an actor I absolutely loved. So the cinema release that we're going to talk about is Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. I can't say it another time, I can only say it twice. Then we've got Madame Web. I know, I know, but I thought I'd give it a go, which was on Sky Movies. We've got Jackpot, which is on Amazon Prime. Plane on Netflix. Yeah, that's a bit of a surprising one for me, but we'll talk about that. Remembering Gene Wilder was the documentary, also on Netflix. And then also, just because it happened to be on TV, and I thought, I've never watched this before, this was the older movie, American Gigolo. The movie that essentially established Richard Gere as a leading man. I had, never seen it, and we'll talk about that towards the end of this. It's an older film, certainly an older film, but with the much newer film, let's dive straight into the return of Tim Burton, Michael Keaton, of course, Winona Ryder, and Catherine O'Hara in Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. It's just mad for me to think that the original came out 36 years ago. Nothing ages you quite as much as realising when a movie came out. 1988. Bearing in mind Batman came out a year later. 1989. What a 1-2 combo for Michael Keaton and Tim Burton. That's a 1-2 punch. That really is in both of their careers. I'm a big fan of the original. I loved it. It's very quirky and amusing and funny. And when you hear the Danny Elfman music strike up for this sequel these years on, you just get this warm feeling inside. You really do. That's pretty much what the movie is about. It's fun. It's not uproariously funny, but then funnily enough, I went back and rewatched the original just the night before, just to kind of make sure any references were fresh in my mind. And actually, the original isn't like uproariously funny. It's not like crazy stuff. It's just amusing and fun. And like I say, it gives you this warm feeling when you watch it. And obviously little creepy elements as well that Tim Burton always brings to stuff as well, in a good way, in a good creepy way, if there is such a thing. It's like the original. It's an enjoyable ride, a memorable one. Musical scenes that you kind of think about afterwards as well, and it brings it all up to date. Really, it's the Dietz family, if you might remember from the original, brought right up to date with what's happening with them now. It's got Jenna Ortega in it as well, and she's actually perfectly cast as Astrid, who's the daughter of Winona Ryder's Lydia. And sometimes when you get these movies that are a big update, and for the modern audience, you kind of think, yeah, they're just putting that someone for the current audience. The youngsters will get who that is. They'll know who that is. I think that would be unfair with Jenna Ortega. I think maybe because of Wednesday, especially, I think she just fits in perfectly into the world of Beetlejuice. It really does work. And yeah, to be honest, all of the Dietz family in this are excellent. I'd say Catherine O'Hara steals the show. She's just a brilliant presence in the first movie, and then this one, I kind of let her go wild a bit, and it's fantastic. She's maybe the funniest character. The funniest character other than Michael Keaton's Beetlejuice himself. And there's an amusing turn as well by Justin Theroux. He's very good as Lydia's slimy partner / producer type, but it's a good character. But as with the original, the most memorable person is always going to be Michael Keaton. I cannot believe he's 73 years old. You would never know. I know he's covered in makeup in this movie, but it's such an energetic, great performance. You just wouldn't know he's 73. That is just madness that he's reached that age by now. He just slips back into the skin of Beetlejuice. Although, interestingly, he was doing an interview with Smartless podcast recently, and he did say on there, for the first, I can't remember, it was a couple of days of filming, it just wasn't quite clicking for him. He felt like he was almost going through the motions of remembering how it was meant to be. And then just suddenly one day, bang, just clicked straight into his old kind kind of ways as Beetlejuice. And yeah, I mean, obviously, it's been a long time, this sequel in development, a long, long time. Originally, after the first one was, well received, there were immediate plans to do a sequel. Tim Burton, Michael Keaton both agreed to do it. There was some, I think the first one that was written in the early drafts back then was Beetlejuice in Hawaii, which would have been interesting. But I think Batman Returns, the work they did on that kind of scuppered that moving forward. Obviously, the Batman movies are a presumably bigger financial success at the time as well. I mean, that was a massive blockbuster, wasn't it, Batman, when it first came out? But there were other ideas as well that kind of the later years. There was Beetlejuice in France. There was Beetlejuice in a Haunted Mansion. There was Beetlejuice in the Wild West. They never really got off the ground. I'd love to see some of those work. It got a bit closer about 10 years ago. Winona Ryder agreed at the time to go into Stranger Things, but only on the condition that she was allowed to break from that if it was to film a Beetlejuice sequel. But then suddenly in 2019, it was shelved and it kind of just went away again. And we had this funny little series of events that happened 3 years later, 2022, when it was announced. The film was suddenly announced. Tim Burton, a few months later, said, "Oh, I'm nothing to do with it." Then a couple of days later, completely walked back on that and said he was signed on and involved. And it turns out he kind of stripped the story back to be this more basic, simple story. The current version that we now see today is Alfred Gough and Miles Miller, who worked on Wednesday with Jenna Ortega, and a series that I used to love back in the day, Smallville, the kind of Superman Clark Kent origin series when he was back at school. And obviously they've done a number of movies as well. They wrote the script. It's a good script. It's a good plot. I really like the kind of the way this one goes along. It is a much tighter, smaller story. I mean, I guess the original was as well. It's the tale of two ghosts in a house trying to get the people out that come in there and try and live there next. It is quite simple, and the sequel carries that on in that terms. It's not meant to be this huge sprawling thing that's too much. It fits in quite nicely. There's no Gina Davis or Alec Baldwin. I think the understanding from that, I saw something Gina Davis did in an interview, it would have been quite difficult to explain why their ghosts had aged. You'd probably have to do de-aging through the entire thing. And so that didn't happen. Obviously, there's been a little bit of Alec Baldwin stuff going on recently, so I don't know whether that played any part or not. But yeah, I think it, without being too not critical, but or too hard on them, really, it's just it doesn't require them. The kind of Beetlejuice was their story with Beetlejuice. This is now moving on with the next family, essentially, that came into the house after them. And the current kind of generation. But there are new actors, new little fun kind of characters that come into it as well. Willem Dafoe is excellent. Willem Dafoe is really, really good in a fun role as an actor played detective, let's put it that way. He's very good. Monica Bellucci turns up, Tim Burton's partner, in a role which is, she's kind of this kind of constant menacing character in the background. I don't know how essential she is to the plot, but it's kind of just another little strand to it. And then Danny DeVito rocks up in quite a fun little role early on in the film as well. Obviously, one of Tim Burton's frequent collaborators as well. So, but look, this is all about, like I say, Michael Keaton. Although, interesting little fact for you. In the original, despite being the titular character of both movies, in the first film, he's only in it for 17 minutes of screen time for the entire runtime. And in the sequel, he's only around for exactly, you guessed it, 17 minutes, apparently. That's what I read it on the internet, so it must be true. It's something that apparently he really pushed for himself, was that he wanted Beetlejuice to only be in a certain amount of screen time so that it was like maximum impact whenever he was on screen. There was no kind of the audience getting tired of him or just being silly for the sake of it, and no subpar stuff for him. You kind of wanted him just to leave the audience wanting more every time he was on screen. I guess it's a little bit like when a horror movie is done right. The kind of the dark presence within that movie is something you don't see too much of, only when you really need to. And the best ones are like that. When they overplay that hand, you're like, yeah, that's not really scary at all. And I guess with this having kind of a dark nature to it as well, I guess that fits in. But he's excellent. He's great fun. You kind of always forget about Michael Keaton. He had this kind of comedic background before he got into movies as well, and I think he was a stand-up briefly as well. And yeah, I love it when he gets, because we've seen him in such a brilliant serious role as well, but getting to see him when he plays this kind of really fun madcap goofball character, he's superb. It's a really enjoyable film. It's very nostalgic, but without being a retread. It's not just simply going over the old ground of the past. And the plot, like I say, is really good. Takes some nice little twists and turns in the film as well. Builds up to quite a fun ending. And I think the fact it's only around 90 minutes long keeps it really tight. And is not, like I say, there's not too much wastage in the film. There's some really cool stuff as well, kind of getting to see on the other side, as it were, in the afterlife, and or the bit before the afterlife. That's good fun. And you can see how, while special effects have come on and they use them in certain elements, there's a lot of practical effects, exactly like the original. And one certain character or species in the sand that we get to see, I love the fact that they've kept to how that was in the original. And it could have ended up being something like Dune, but it's not. You'll know what I mean if you've seen the original. And it's made a lot of money too. It's doing well. Bearing in mind it's a very long in the making sequel. Younger viewers might not have ever seen the original. And also it didn't come out at Halloween, which was maybe an interesting choice. But it's made, I think, $265 million already worldwide, which is, I think it's superb for a film like that as well. I'd be very interested to see whether that allows us to, or there's a push for a third one to kind of round out a trilogy. It doesn't need it. I think I've got to be honest. It doesn't require it. But I certainly wouldn't pass up seeing more of Beetlejuice's story, and maybe seeing him in a different location, in a different time, maybe in the past. Although we do get a little bit of backstory with him, which was interesting. But no, I really enjoyed it. It was good fun, really good cinema trip, and yeah, like I say, a nice warm feeling when you're watching it. A movie that did not give me a nice warm feeling was Madame Web. So whenever a movie is very widely criticised and panned, I always go in trying to be like as objective and fresh-eyed as possible and thinking, okay, let's not take any of that into account. Let's just see it as I find it. Most of the time, by doing that, you'll find that the reaction's a little bit over the top, and sometimes there's a bit of a gang mentality. It becomes fashionable to bash a movie, and you watch it like, it's not as bad as people made out. Madame Web is as bad as people make out. It is, it's dreadful. It's such a mess of a movie. It's like lots of different ideas or thoughts on how maybe you want to make a superhero movie, and then just done in the most dull paint-by-numbers style you can. And I've never watched a movie, this is probably the best way to sum up, I've never watched a movie before that teased the prospect of another movie that was better throughout the entire thing. That's what it does. And it's a movie that we'll never get to see, especially now because it absolutely tanked. Because like throughout, we see all these glimpses of characters within this movie, how they will be in the future. And it's far more interesting. You're watching these little glimpses of the future. It's like, why is that not the story now? I don't need to know this origin-y bit. This origin bit could be done within 10, 15 minutes. Instead, we're getting a whole movie about what these characters might be like in the future. It's like, without giving too much away, because it is essentially anyone that knows the comics and knows what the comics knows what these are. This group of women go on to become Spider Women, but we're kind of told, if you stick with us and watch this absolute garbage, maybe one day you'll be able to see a movie with them becoming Spider Women. Wouldn't that be great? It's like, what are you doing? Instead, it's all about the main character, Madame Web, and how Cassandra Webb becomes her. But it's very difficult to care. It's just, a movie's really bad when the exposition is so long and bad. They've got all these characters saying these really long-winded things about themselves, and you're like, that's not how people speak. That is not how the real world works at all. And even when it's meant to be fun, like the action scenes are quite drab, The script is very flat, like I say, and it takes decent actors. These are all actors who have done very well in other stuff. Of course, Dakota Johnson is the main character, Sydney Sweeney, who's in everything right now, Celeste O'Connor, Isabella Merced, and it just wastes them. The only one who maybe at least doesn't fall underneath the weight of it all, Adam Scott. He's Ben Parker, and he kind of has quite limited screen time, but he makes the most out of it. But yeah, like I said, it feels like a paint-by-numbers superhero movie, but they don't actually use all the colours. It's like, oh, we've only got these kind of drab grey colours. Oh, let's just use these, it'll work. And it's part of the same world as Morbius, which also got panned, but I actually found Morbius to be better than this movie. Morbius, it wasn't great, but the first half of it built up quite nicely, and then it went a little bit astray. Quite astray. But Madam Web is just dull throughout the entire thing. It could be up there, and I know there's some that could take this title. It could be up there with the worst superhero film I've seen. The final scene itself, I laughed in it, and I don't think that's the intention. Especially when you see it, you'll realise that's probably not what you're meant to do. It's a little bit twisted, probably, to laugh at it, but it's just so poorly handled and so cheesily done. You just don't develop any emotional connection with any of the characters. So if anything happens to them along the way, you're like, whatever. It's just, and when you've got movies, the movie stars like Sydney Sweeney afterwards was kind of mocking it. I think was it on Saturday Night Live, something like that. You kind of know it's like, oh crikey, even if they're taking the mickey out of it straight after it's come out, that's never a good sign. And it's directed by S.J. Clarkson, British TV director who has done some stuff that I really like. She's done a couple of episodes of Jessica Jones, the series, which I really liked. 2 episodes of The Defenders, which was like the team up with Jessica Jones, Daredevil, Luke Cage, Iron Fist on Netflix, which was good. She's also done like high quality TV like Succession, Dexter, Orange is the New Black, House, Ugly Betty, Bates Motel. So she's got a great CV, and I just feel really sorry for her. It's almost like, okay, you're going to get your first movie shot. Here you go, direct this movie. And then she's kind of got like a jigsaw and like loads of the pieces are missing. And it's just like this broken thing. And I just wonder at what point during it, if there was a point that she was just like, oh no, this just isn't working. It's such a shame. And it's barely scraped past the $100 million mark worldwide. Safe to assume, like I said, we're not going to see a sequel. Sony are just doing this remarkable job of pretty much burying their own Spider-Man universe. They are so reliant on Venom as their one big thing, as well as, of course, Spider-Man himself, which Marvel Studios have kind of got now as part of their deal. And I think there's talk about another deal to extend him being part of that world. And I don't think you can blame them, because quite frankly, the things that Sony have done with Morbius and with this Madam Web, and it's just like, you wouldn't trust them to kind of make a success out of it. Venom has kind of been the exception to the rule, and obviously The Last Dance coming out soon from that. And there's Kraven the Hunter is to come as well. We'll see. Obviously, it's been long in the making, that one, and going off these last 2, it doesn't hold out, give you much hope for it, but fingers crossed it does something different. They've got TV shows on the way. I think Spider Noir is coming out as well, or is in the works. And yeah, they need to really just look at everything they've done and say, no, don't do that. Actually, really put some effort into this. Take some time and get it right, because just dreadful. It was just. I always try to give movies a chance, and I did, but I just found myself like, whoa, this is just going nowhere. But there you go. There you go. That's Madame Web. Next up is Jackpot, which is to set the scene. It's set in the near future, where a grand lottery gives one person in a very rundown version of California an incredible amount of money. However, the caveat to that is you've got to survive for 24 hours without being killed. And anyone else the person that kills you, if they kill you, they get your huge amount of millions that you'll get. So that's the basic premise, which is an interesting one. It's quite a fun concept. It stars Awkwafina, who she's good fun. I like her and stuff. The Crazy Rich Asians was probably the one that kind of first really brought her to my attention, as it were. But she's been good in various bits and pieces I've seen her in, and it's got John Cena as well, who feels like almost every other Amazon movie that comes out nowadays has got John Cena in it. Yeah, he's good. He's good in his little role. Not a little role; it's quite a big role. Simu Liu, I'm pretty clear the pronunciation of that. Who Shang-Chi. Obviously, it was his big movie. He's pops up in quite a good role as well, bit of a different role. The movie itself, it's better than I expected it to be. I'm not saying it was great. It definitely wasn't great. It could have been absolutely awful, but I feel like the two main leads probably rise it above that. They bring it up above what would be a terrible kind of movie. But they just bring enough kind of heart to it and a few laughs. It's very consistent in the laughs. There's some bits you actually do laugh out loud to, and there's other bits like. It's directed by Paul Feig, who directed Bridesmaids. Did a few Office episodes, the American version. Last Christmas, the Ghostbusters reboot. He knows how to handle physical comedy, and there are some genuinely amusing moments when that comes into play. But like I say, as it goes on, there's kind of meh moments. The pacing's a bit off. It starts quite interesting. The whole concept, like I say, is quite a good one. But it just starts to veer all over the place as it goes on. And yeah, I wouldn't say I would heartily recommend it to anyone, but it's probably better than I expected it to be when I turned it on. And hey, it's better than Madam Web, but that's not really saying very much, is it? So yeah, next movie. Next movie surprised me. I thought it was going to be one of the weaker ones of this bunch. Came out last year. It's the imaginatively titled Plane. Everything about that should scream to you, this is going to be rubbish. It's literally called Plane. It's about a plane. It's got Gerard Butler in it and Mike Coulter, who I know we just mentioned his character as Luke Cage. It's the story of a flight, a New Year's Eve flight that goes very wrong in a storm, and pilot has to land on this island, which has some, let's say, unsavoury characters on it. It's kind of, yeah, that's probably the best way to put it. It's quite a simple concept, and that's it. And trying to get everyone out of that situation. It's directed by Jean-Francois Richet, and as I say, it shouldn't be good, but it works. I mean, it gets towards the end, it gets a little bit frantic, and it maybe slightly loses a lot of the suspense to begin with, but I actually thought a lot of it's very good. I'd actually go so I'll say quite good. Let's maybe not go very. We'll say quite good. It's kind of the build, because you know what's going to happen. You know the premise of this movie is that the plane is going to have an issue and it's going to end up in somewhere that they really don't want to be. And the way it gets there is very well done. There's come lots of little shocks. Characters you do, unlike Madame Web, you do connect with the characters. Gerard Butler's just very good in these sort of things, isn't he? He's a very dependable leading man in this. And I wouldn't say he plays, like he does in various action roles. He's not like the I can beat anyone up kind of role. He's a bit more vulnerable, and he's a pilot. That's it. He's not billed as this kind of rough, tough, like army trained type. He's just someone that I guess can handle himself. Is probably the best way to put it. He's good, and he carries it all very well. Mike Coulter is actually excellent. I think he's very good in it. He plays a passenger, let's say, with a complicated backstory. And he is the one who has a little bit more training, and he's very, very good in it. And then you've got this kind of supporting cast who, they all add little bits. It's like a little bit of an ensemble cast. You've got the passengers, you've got another pilot, stewardess on the plane, and people back at the airline who are trying to sort this all out and help them. You've got Yosan Ann's very good. Tony Goldwyn, who I will always see as the baddie from Ghost, or one of the baddies. Although he has recently popped up again, and he kind of did a lot of TV, and he's popped up again in movies like King Richard and Oppenheimer recently. But he's good in this as well. It's quite a throwback movie. It feels like a movie that could exist in the 80s or 90s, and that would be fine. It doesn't require any kind of modern elements to it. I get the impression this is going to be one that whenever it pops up on the telly in years to come, I'm probably going to be like, I could easily just sit down and watch this again. It's very watchable. A pleasant surprise this week for me, that one. It was like it's got that the name. The name is ridiculous in itself. It's so high concept, isn't it? I mean, it made $74 million worldwide, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it made a profit. That was a profit for it, and they actually announced, which was great, a sequel which was going to have Mike Coulter's character as the lead, called Ship. It's like plane, ship. What's the next one going to be? Scooter and stuff like that. Various forms of transport, but actually apparently they had to change that. I don't know if maybe there was a trademark issue or something, but I can't remember exactly what it was. But it's now going to be called Plane 2 Stowaway, while still set on a ship. It's like, we need to keep the plane in there so people know it's from the plane movie from before, but it's on a ship. Nah, it doesn't matter, they'll be fine. I love that sort of stuff. It's just like, yeah, whatever, we can get past that with a little bit of creativity. But yeah, so yeah, if you get some spare time and you're kind of stuck for maybe a good Saturday night movie, yeah, it's good fun. It's got plenty of action in it, got a bit of suspense in it. It's got two good, dependable kind of male leads in it as well. Yeah, maybe not too much for the women to do. Kind of thinking about that, they're very much maybe secondary characters in this. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that until literally as soon as I said the two male leads, you kind of think there isn't really a female lead to this. They're all very much supporting. So maybe that's something against it. Next up is Remembering Gene Wilder, which is lovely. I really loved it. Look, it's probably not the most like one of those documentaries that really scratches deep beneath the surface under what made this great and famous actor tick. But it's very heartwarming. Hour and a half or so, chronicles his career and his later battle with Alzheimer's, which I didn't realise. I kind of forgot that it was kept quiet until, I don't know, it was right at the end or afterwards, because he didn't want all the Willy Wonka fans to be really upset that Willy Wonka was ill. I love that. I absolutely love that whole idea, that concept. So this documentary is directed by Ron Frank, and it features the very clever hook that it's narrated by Gene Wilder himself. And what they've done is that he did an audiobook version of his 2005 memoir, Kiss Me Like a Stranger, My Search for Love and Art. And so they use his voice from that as the narrator of his own story. And it works so well. Because he was in so many wonderful movies. Of course, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, probably we all remember as kids. But also mega amazing films over the years. The Producers, Young Frankenstein. One of my favourites as a kid was See No Evil, Hear No Evil. I loved that film. I even liked, it wasn't probably one of his bigger movies, but The Frisco Kid with Harrison Ford. I really enjoyed that. And there's a nice bit in this that explains the story and who was meant to be in it and how it ended up being Harrison Ford. And like the tales of how the Producers and Young Frankenstein got made and how he was able to be in the Producers despite the studio wanting someone else. And Young Frankenstein was very much his baby as well. And then that's not even mentioning Blazing Saddles, Stir Crazy. The Woman in Red, I loved that as a kid as well. And the people in it are really, really, they've got the perfect people. Mel Brooks is, of course, Gene Wilder's wife, Karen Wilder, his wife towards the end, Alan Alda's, Carol Kane, Harry Connick Jr. pops up as well. That they're all got really interesting insight into his life. Mel Brooks is the piece de resistance. He is the big fish, as it were, for this tale. He's the one that obviously worked with him on such huge films, and he's able to give such brilliant insights into it. And of course, how sad he was when they lost him at the end, and some of the film, like the footage, the family footage of him towards the end, it's like it's very sad. But his tale is lovely, and how he kind of came to be who he is. And I've got a real soft spot for Gene Wilder, I always have. And this movie kind of reinforced a lot of the things I hoped that I would hear about him. And it like I say, it may not go too deep in many parts, but it does in certain aspects. And I learned plenty about him that I didn't know, and you will too if he's someone you grew up watching as well. It's a really lovely documentary, and also a nice insight, I think, into how they used to make movies back in those days as well, and how kind of difficult in different ways than it is today. I really recommend it. It's a lovely documentary. So the final movie of the bunch is the one where we're heading back in time for, which was on Sky. It's American Gigolo. It just happened to be starting. It was about 30 seconds in, and I was like, yeah, I've never seen this. And this was the movie that everyone will go on about that kind of established Richard Gere as a star, really, or certainly as a leading man. And it's it's a tale, if you don't know about it, it's a tale of an LA escort, the kind of, maybe the title gives that away of the movie, who's framed for murder. And it was written and directed by Paul Schrader, who you might know wrote Taxi Driver. He was very famous around that time, and that when the group of like Coppola, Spielberg, Scorsese, and all of that were at that time. Was it Brian De Palma as well? I'm trying to remember the group now. But he was kind of part of that group. And like I say, this was the one that launched Richard Gere into the public consciousness as a leading man, as a sex symbol. Lauren Hutton's also in it. She's very good. So is Hector Elizondo. So I know it. Maybe this is the same for others. I know Hector Elizondo as he's always like the good guy in Gary Marshall movies, like Pretty Woman. He was only in Pretty Woman for 10 minutes, but he got a Golden Globe nomination for it. It was very strange to see him in this as a young man. I've seen him kind of a bit older, but I'd never seen him kind of look this young, and it's a bit like, oh wow, you're so used to seeing him in a certain way, and that is, I guess, unfortunately for many actors and actresses, is they are immortalised in film for people, and then when you see them a bit older, it's like, way, how did that happen? And that's time. That's what it does to all of us. The movie is very much one of its time, and you'll know what I mean when you watch it. I think it was originally meant to star John Travolta. There's a little bit of a thing with John Travolta and Richard Gere, that not only this movie, but apparently Richard Gere took on roles after John Travolta rejected them in Officer and a Gentleman, Days of Heaven, and Chicago. So he's the quartet he has taken on after John Travolta's decided it wasn't for him. There are other people turning this movie. I think Christopher Reeve was one of them. Chevy Chase, I read, which was quite an interesting one. Can't really see him in this role. Bit of trivia for you. So Richard Gere's brief nude scenes in this movie were the first time a Hollywood actor has gone frontally nude, or had gone frontally nude in a movie. There you go. Bit of strange nudity trivia for you. It's a very stylish movie. Apparently it made Armani very big brand in Hollywood after this came out. It's quite dark. It's quite sad in places as well, kind of how his life is. But maybe just an interesting study of LA and this kind of this scene, as it were, of this aspect of LA life at the time. It also became a short-lived TV series a couple of years back. John Bernthal, the brilliant John Bernthal, it was in the lead role. It only lasted one season, but yeah, it's one of those where it was kind of what I expected to be. I wouldn't say it was a movie that blew me away and it was like an absolute classic that I feel everyone needs to watch, but it's definitely a very interesting story, and you can see how Richard Gere became a star from it. And yeah, it's got, like I say, it's very stylish to watch as well. So but one I just, 1980. Here we are, all these years on. I'd never seen it, but there are a few movies like that, and that's why I will try sometimes in these to watch an older film that's kind of escaped my consciousness or escaped my eyes over the years, because maybe other people like myself who've just missed it, and then it gives them some idea what it might be about. So that's the bunch for this week. There's a bunch of movies coming. We've got Speak No Evil, which is out at the moment, which I'd love to go and see. Wolves is about to come out as well, with Brad Pitt and George Clooney. James McAvoy's in Speak No Evil, by the way. It's getting good reviews, that is, especially his performance. Megalopolis, Francis Ford Coppola's return, with Adam Driver in that, and tons of other people. That's on its way. Joker, Folie à Deux, comes in a fortnight. Venom The Last Dance, as we spoke earlier, that's the end of the month. Yeah, so there's a load on there, but there's also will be various ones on streaming that I'm going to try and catch up with in the days ahead. So yeah, that's all, folks, as they would say, for this week. Thanks for watching Gold Goes to the Movie, I guess, again, movies again. And as always, stay healthy, stay safe, keep watching those movies. I shall catch you later. Goodbye.